Okay, so this next video lecture is the continuation of our module 2. So we are now in the transaction processing models. So basically we have two broad types. Okay, so we have the batch processing and the real-time processing. So when we say batch processing, of course, this is the grouping of the batches before a transaction will be processed, okay, and will in a single event. While the real-time processing system, on the other hand, when an event or transaction takes place, immediately these individual transactions will be processed. Okay, so that on real-time and online updating will be implemented. So we have here the batch processing or sequential file. Okay, this is how you will document. Okay, or this is how batch processing is documented in a process flow. Okay, so again, the main the I mean the feature of the batch processing is that it will also have the source documents, okay, the input of the data in the transaction or from the transaction, but this again will be processed in a batch. Okay, so meaning the before the transaction will be processed. Okay, so the entity will wait for a certain amount of transactions, okay, before they can proceed, okay, to the input and the processing of this data. Okay, so here they have the unedited transactions. Okay, and then after that, if a number of transaction in a batch is now completed, so they can edit and they can also detect if there are any errors. Okay, so after that, they will have the edited transactions. Okay, they can also sort it. Okay, and then update it in their master file or in the new master file for any subsidiary ledgers. But basically, again, for batch processing, this is the processing of the transaction of of many transactions, I mean. Okay, so we have here the steps, okay, in our batch processing or sequential file. So we have the keystroke. So this is the source document, okay, that is used or transcribed by the clerks to the computer for processing later on. Okay, so they just input the source document, but the processing will be uh, uh, done once there are an acceptable amount of transactions for a batch are reached. Okay, so we also have the edit run. So this identifies the clerical errors. Okay, and they also have their error file. So they also have the sort run, which places the transaction file in the same order as our master file. Update run, so this changes the value appropriate fields, okay, to reflect the transaction. And also backup procedure. This is the original master continues to exist and a new master file will be created if necessary. Okay, so this is how it is in a batch processing. What about for real-time system? So in a real-time system, these are the processing of the transactions individually, okay, at the moment when the transaction occurs. So there is no lag time between the transaction and the processing. So generally, this require, however, greater resources than batch processing because they are dedicated, I mean, in processing the capacity. However, the cost differentials are decreasing. So oftentimes, they have longer system development time for this type of processing. So here, we have the difference between the batch processing and real-time processing. So in terms of the information time frame, so in batch processing, there is lag, okay, lag time that exists between the transaction and when it is recorded, because again the entity has to wait for a number of transactions before they will proceed to process the data. While in real-time processing, processing takes place, as mentioned earlier, when the transaction occurs. In terms of resources, generally in a batch processing, fewer resources are required. Okay, while in real-time processing, more resources. Okay, because again, they have to process every time there is a transaction. For in terms of operational efficiency, so in the batch processing, there are records which are processed after the event to avoid delays. Okay, while in the real time, all the records, okay, that relates to the event are processed immediately. Okay, so those are the differences between the data processing uh, batch and real time methods. Okay, so we will continue with the next topic under this model. This is the data coding schemes. So when we say coding or data coding, this involves the creation of simple numeric or any alphabetical codes to represent the event or the transaction that facilitates efficient data processing. So what are the uses of coding in AIS? Basically, this concisely represent a large amount of complex information, and that would be unmanageable. Okay, so in this case, the entity will be able to illustrate it in a way that they can understand how this um, transactions flow, what are the processes involved, and the documents that are needed, okay, in the conduct of such processes. So another use of the coding is this will provide a means of accountability over the completeness of the transaction. So meaning, those personnel or agent who is responsible will be easily identified. Because, for example, in if you could still remember in the data uh, documentation techniques, okay, for example, in system flow charting, so you can see there what department is responsible for that particular action or transaction and document. Okay. Another use of coding in AIS is it will identify also a unique transaction and accounts within a file. Okay, because they will be assigned a distinct and a unique code. Okay, so that it can easily be identified. And of course, to support the audit function because it will provide effective audit trail. So we have here the numeric and alphabetic coding schemes. So we have the sequential code. So this will represent the item's sequential record or logical record. In this case, you can use the pre-numbered source documents to track each transactions that are processed. Okay. Another is the block codes, meaning in this case, it will represent the whole classes by assigning each class a specific range, okay, between the coding scheme. So of course, this is used for chart of accounts, okay, and the basics of our general ledger. It will also allow for easy insertion of the new codes within the block and don't have to reorganize the coding structure. And of course, we also have the group codes. Okay, so this will represent the complex items or events which involves two or more pieces of data. Okay, for example, coding scheme for tracking sales. So you can use this code 04-09-476214-99. So what does it mean? it's like barcode. Okay, so 04 is the store number, so that's the first two number. The second number 09 is the department number. The next six number is for the item number, and the last two number is for the salesperson. So this is how you can code a transaction to locate the store, the department, the item, and the person involved. Okay, so this is how group codes, okay, are done. Okay, for alphabetic coding scheme, on the other hand, these are codes used for the same purposes as our numeric codes. So you can also assign sequential, or you can also be assigned sequentially or as used in a block and group coding techniques. Okay, so we can use the alphabetic coding scheme. And it may also be used to represent large number of items and can represent up to 26 variations per field. So we have here, we also have here the mnemonic coding. So mnemonic codes, these are alphabetical characters, okay, used to abbreviate or for acronyms and other types of combination. So it does not require the users to memorize the meaning, since the code itself is informative and it's closely identified to the abbreviated term or the acronym. So for example, okay, in your curriculum, so we use the accounting, ACCTG. So that's accounting. Okay, course number is 101. 101 can mean first year in the first semester. Okay, and that is, or the first subject. Okay, we also have the psychology, management, and marketing. Okay, so here they have the course number, which represents their order in the curriculum or in the class year of a student in the program. So another is, for example, okay, we have the code for NY. So of course that's New York, CA, California, OK, Oklahoma, and so on. So this is how mnemonic codes are, mnemonic coding scheme are used. Okay, so those are the different data coding schemes that an entity can use, okay, in the data flow and processing, or even in the conduct of the transactions, to make it easier for them to identify what are the items, who are the persons involved or responsible, and the department which the transaction also relates, and so on.